Jack was chosen because of his heart.
For as long as I can remember, I just wanted to do what was right.
He fights for the underdog, people who are being bullied.
He had this charisma that immediately people latched onto.
He was an icon.
I wish to hell I'd have been Captain America.
It's just a guy with a shield. That was something that was really compelling.
What's great about the Marvel heroes is that they're interesting without their superpowers.
Nobody can touch the energy that's in Kirby pages.
That's the look he was going for.
The biggest impact comic book hero of all time.
He represents the figure that we needed.
He was a great character, ultra-patriotic.
The comic book version of a founding father.
There's an action, there's an energy to it.
It was big, it was in your face.
That's what you wanted to see.
But there's more to the story than that.
They say you should never judge a book by its cover, for many times it is not the world's biggest, strongest, and fastest on the outside who have the largest hearts. Such was the case with an undersized kid from Brooklyn named Steve Rogers, who would change the course of comic book history in the Marvel Universe. From his first appearance in 1941 to today's blockbuster films, this is Marvel's Captain America, 75 Heroic Years. New York, 1940, America's great melting pot, where our country's finest thinkers, industrialists, and artists converged to forge the true American dream.
Jack Kirby and Joe Simon very much spoke to the American dream.
They were children of Jewish immigrants. They really sort of had to work their way up.
My father grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. They were very poor. They lived in just this little typical tenement all crowded into the one room.
I grew up on some of the rougher neighborhoods.
There were gangs, kids duking out in the streets. It was very rough.
Two young, not terribly large guys. They certainly weren't the kind of image of their heroes.
Most times, a fictional character is based purely on the experiences of that particular author.
Jack wasn't a big guy.
He was feisty. He was a fighter. In that time, you had to be.
Joe lived in a neighborhood where there was ethnic strife.
He got bullied a lot.
Kirby had a dislike for bullies in any form.
Regardless of whether the fact he was going to get beat up or not, he would always step in to help.
You just don't know when to give up, do you?
You're gonna do this all day.
That played a big part in the creation of Captain America, somebody who would take on the bullies.
I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
Joe wanted to go to college, and he couldn't get in. They would only take a certain amount of Jews.
A lot of the writers and artists that worked in comics couldn't get a legitimate job in the Mad Men advertising world.
These incredibly talented people denied fair opportunity, and they created some of the greatest American products.
They met at Fox Publishing. Joe got a job at Timely, which is what Marvel was at the time.
Timely Comics was founded in 1939. Martin Goodman was the publisher.
Joe was the editor, and Jack was the de facto art director.
They were brilliant. I mean, Joe and Jack wrote and drew. They worked as a team.
They were different personalities. My father, the little scrappy guy.
Joe was more the guy who concentrated on the business end of it. Jack was always hunched over the drawing boards, working like a demon, 2-3 pages a day.
The minute Joe Simon saw Jack Kirby's artwork, he knew this was something spectacular. How kinetic it was, how it moved across the page. He saw it as the work of a master.
They were very good friends, besides being partners.
Jack said, "We're going to move across the street," and Joe said, "Great."
I thought the Kirbys were our cousins.
At that time, the big problem was Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. I guess that where anybody is from affects the way he writes or draws.
Simon and Kirby, as Jews, they definitely knew what side of the war they were on.
They were very much aware of what was happening to not just Jews, but to everyone.
Martin Goodman wanted some kind of hero comic.
Joe had this idea for a character called the Super American.
They were giving the public something to sort of feed their interest in this situation.
The Times called for a patriotic hero.
This was their way of taking on the Nazi Empire.
Creating this character who would take on Hitler.
They worked on what's the antithesis.
The whole idea of America and what it stood for: thwart evil, fight bullies, defend the downtrodden.
The underdog winning out over the aggressor.
Quintessential ideology of the American dream.
There were so many characters with the word super in their title.
It said Captain America.
Captain America was born.
Captain America was born out of kind of the experiences of the world. Everyone was going through a war.
Martin Goodman was afraid that somebody would shoot Hitler before the comic came out.
They had to turn this thing out quick.
Joe and Jack apparently put in a real string of all-nighters.
On the cover of Captain America #1, there is a guy who is wearing the American flag.
Bursting into some Nazi bunker and smashing Hitler with the right cross. That came out, and it was a huge sensation.
That first issue sold 1 million copies. It was so popular.
That cover, while incredibly popular, was also very, very controversial.
We weren't in World War II at that point.
A political statement on the cover of a comic book.
You don't really stop and think about how provocative an image that was. This was a guy who was the head of state of an entire nation, and a nation that was going to war with all the people around him.
Jack and Joe received a lot of hate mail because there were people that felt that Captain America wasn't standing for their ideals.
The American Nazi Party was very strong in New York City. They got a lot of death threats.
There were people actually protesting outside the offices of Timely at that time.
Sinister-looking characters hanging around.
LaGuardia actually placed some protection on the Timely Comics offices.
In a country divided, Cap's place in culture was in question, but something was about to happen that would unite the country completely.
State which will live in infamy.
Ask any comic book writer, and they'll tell you that creating a superhero is no small task. Creating a superhero that would change the world is a nearly impossible one. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, America entered World War II.
Captain America was seen as the great symbol of our willingness to stand up in the face of tyranny.
Suddenly you had the perfect enemies. It gave Captain America a whole reason for existence.
He was born out of united belief and a united experience.
Captain America during the early war years was selling in excess of 1 million copies an issue. It struck a nerve at that particular moment.
Joe and Jack worked on Cap for about a year, but then they did sign up. Joe was assigned to the Public Information Office.
A lot of the comic book people got to serve in non-combat situations. Slightly safer service than being on the front lines. But Kirby didn't just serve, he served as an actual grunt. He went to whomever the head of his unit was and said, you know, I'm Jack Kirby and I draw Captain America. The guy was like, go out there to no man's land. Every place you see a Nazi tank, draw an X.
Obviously, he was not too thrilled with that.
Jack was in the wave that came in the day after the first wave at D-Day.
He saw combat. He saw things that would haunt him the rest of his life.
What he saw in Captain America is what he saw in his fellow troops. Guys just willing to die to help each other.
Not anyone could have just become Captain America. It was what was inside of Steve Rogers. The fact that Steve Rogers had this morality, these ethics, this huge heart and empathy was something that just got enhanced even more so by the formula.
Steve Rogers grew up in the Depression, orphaned, sickly, but he felt this underlying need to join in this fight.
They come up with this serum and they give it to sickly Steve Rogers.
Lo and behold, it turned him into Captain America.
He was created as the first super soldier.
But at the very same moment, the creator of this formula is killed. He's now going to be the only one.
Cap comics were immensely popular with soldiers abroad.
Comics became a language. It didn't matter whether or not you read well. It was something that you could share with a buddy.
Everybody wanted to be that super soldier. I certainly know that there were times when I wished to hell I'd have been Captain America.
There's a huge list of characters within Captain America that would separate it from the norm.
Joe says that he had a drawing of Captain America, and it had a line on it that said, I think he should have a partner.
He said, Captain America has to have somebody to talk to, or he'll be talking to himself all the time.
Publishers felt that these adult superheroes needed a kid's sidekick so that kids could relate to them. Bucky Barnes, ironically enough, was this kid in the middle of World War II. following Cap around and kicking Nazi butt.
Bucky Barnes was the mascot of their army camp. Bucky stumbling into Steve Rogers, changing it in the tent. And in the world of the charming comic book, he goes, all right, well, I either have to kill you or you become my sidekick.
Who Cap very carelessly led into World War II. He like took a 10-year-old into battle.
You got super serum and a bulletproof shield, but this kid just come along. I mean, it's like, okay.
You can't talk about Captain America without talking about the Red Skull.
He is the super soldier experiment gone wrong.
Just evil incarnate.
Here was Cap, who looked more like the idyllic version of the Aryan race as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, perfect specimen. And then here was the Red Skull, this red-faced creature who would scare children at night as opposed to inspire them.
You see Captain America fighting the Red Skull, you know whose side you better be on.
Are you ready for our dance? Peggy's someone that's a strong character and someone that was an equal in many ways to Captain America.
Agent Carter's fighting for the rights of people in the same kind of way that Steve did.
Her set of ideals is Captain America, and everyone else has to meet that set of ideals.
It just also goes to the chemistry between her and Cap. They had such an effect on each other.
She opens her heart up romantically. She had something more to offer.
Go get him.
Throughout the world, throngs of people hail the end of the war in Europe. A grateful nation gives thanks for victory.
Superheroes had served a real purpose during the war, but when the war was over, all of a sudden they looked like they had nothing to do anymore.
We wanted to get back to normalcy.
People perhaps had had enough of war.
A myriad of genres proliferated. There were a lot of crime comics. There were a lot of romance comics.
Aliens come into focus. Sci-fi starts taking over. The enemy was gone. We won. And, you know, Captain America, as you can imagine, took the biggest hit. I mean, he's only there to fight a certain enemy. And they're gone.
The creators involved don't quite know what to do with Captain America. Cap at that time was referred to as Captain America Commie Smasher.
The Cold War isn't exactly the greatest war in terms of action.
Comics were not the preferred way for kids to get entertained.
Everybody had a television. People just started to read less.
And so all the comic books sort of went away, sales tanked.
My publisher, Martin Goodman, told me, let's drop the Captain America books.
Captain America and Human Torch and Submariner were canceled in 1949. We had every reason to believe that there would never again be any real superheroes in comics or anywhere else.
It wasn't until the 1960s, with the birth of Marvel comic books and the rebirth of the modern superhero, that comics really turned around.
Timely's comic book division relaunched in full during 1961 under the name it would be known as from that day forward, Marvel Comics, coined by Goodman himself.
Marvel started their own new group of titles, beginning with the Fantastic Four.
Once the Fantastic Four became a hit, Martin Goodman obviously wanted to retool everything in the shop over the period of the next couple of years into superheroes.
So many of the characters that we know today, whether it's Iron Man or Thor or Captain America, suddenly found themselves in a brand new world.
The rebirth of Captain America, the resurrection of Captain America, so to speak, a brilliant idea by Stan Lee, where the Avengers uncover him in a block of ice.
I had always liked Captain America, and I felt the war is now way past us. He was a great character. Why don't we bring him back? So we came up with this idea that during the war, he had been in a plane that was shot down, and the plane crashed into an iceberg, and his body was sort of frozen. And years later, people found it and dug him out, and he came back to life.
And suddenly, there's this whole different element to the character. He's a man out of time. Amazing tragedy in his life. Not only has he lost these decades of his life and his friends, he lost his best friend. His best friend, Bucky.
He still thinks of things the way he did just before and during World War II. And he's the ultimate patriot in our country. He wasn't just a guy fighting the bad guys.
There he was, bursting out on that cover.
The minute he was back, you knew he was a star.
Jack and Stan had an unparalleled, just an unimaginable amount of success.
Marvel becomes so popular so quickly that Stan got to a point where he was writing every book. So to sit there and type scripts would have just taken an incredible amount of time. So in the case of Jack was as much a writer as he was an artist. So what Stan was doing, which then eventually became known as the Marvel method, Jack would come into the office and Stan would act out the story and say, this is what happens in this issue, right? Here's point A, B, C, there's your story. Jack would go home and break it down into 20-some-odd pages. And so in essence, he would beat out the story, add little elements here and there.
One of those fantastic fight sequences where, you know, he would have 6 panels of Captain America fighting Batroc the Leaper. And it was just like, this is a master class in how to stage an action sequence.
Then those pages would come back to Stan. And Stan would look at these pages and then start to have ideas of his own, and then he'd start to write his own dialogue. And sometimes maybe that's what Jack had in mind, and sometimes it might not have been.
Jack was doing 4 books a month. You know, most guys who draw books today, if you get 6 books a year out of them, it's a big year. His characters came off the page. Unbridled talent led to this pace of work that just said, I'm just going to draw what I'm thinking of. It led into stuff that no one else was drawing because he's the only guy who saw it.
Those stories inspired me so much because the way Stan and Jack would start a story, there was a shot of Captain America spread eagle like this, falling out of a plane. The shot was from above, right? So he's just falling. No time to explain what's going on. Let's go! That is perfect storytelling.
Was he wearing a parachute?
No. Who cares why he's falling out of a plane? Where's that plane from? Where is he landing? You don't need to know all that. It's happening. Just roll with it.
And it is here that the struggle for Vietnam may ultimately be decided.
The late 60s were a time of great change for our country, and that meant great change for Captain America.
At that particular time, it was the time of the civil rights movement, street protests, and so forth.
What's great about Stan Lee's writing, he believed in America. He did not close his eyes to what was wrong in the country, but he made Captain America represent the spirit of the possible. He made me believe in the hope of America.
We needed another black character in our books. And I thought Captain America was one guy who was a real loner. And I thought it might be interesting if he had somebody as a partner, a sidekick, or at least a good friend.
Stan had always hated sidekicks. He just didn't like them. That's why he was happy to see Bucky go.
I came up with the idea of the Falcon, somebody who had the ability to fly. You know, if you think about it, Captain America is really the only Marvel superhero who doesn't have a superpower. He can't fly, he's not bulletproof, he's not invisible. He's just a guy who is better than anyone else at what he does. So I thought it would be interesting to give him a partner who had a superpower, who could fly. And I'd make him a black man and call him the Falcon.
The first time I read a Captain America comic was when I raided my brother's comic stash. He had an old Captain America and Falcon comic. I just remember being struck by that image and saying, holy cow, this is amazing. Seeing black faces in a book was pretty rare.
Falcon became this amazing character who connected Cap to the real world in the 60s and 70s.
Here is the modern voice of what youth culture at that time was really going through.
In Harlem, the funeral of a teenager who had been shot by a policeman set off demonstrations against alleged police brutality.
The fact is, the Mad Bomb story is an incredible story that a bunch of rich elites want to overthrow the Constitution, and they want to achieve that by driving Americans mad so they kill each other. We're living that now. That is America today. We're living in the Mad Bomb. It is one of the most prescient comic book stories ever written. I mean, that's the spirit of Marvel, right? You do something shocking and provocative that people really care about.
And then there's Watergate.
Then there was this gigantic scandal with President Nixon.
With Watergate and Vietnam and everything else happening, there was this seed of disillusionment with Steve Rogers and his persona of Captain America.
Watergate just took over America. The whole idea that the president might have done something illegal was a mind-blowing concept in the 70s. Captain America has got to respond to it. I'm the only guy in the world writing Captain America. And if I don't do this, then it doesn't happen, and it just makes sense to me that it should.
This group, the Secret Empire, had infiltrated the very highest levels of American government. He uncovers the whole conspiracy, and the fact that it reaches so high completely disillusions him that he actually gives up being Captain America. And so Steve Rogers comes back in this new costumed identity as Nomad, the man without a country.
But the problem was the name of the book was Captain America, and Nomad wasn't going to sell that book.
And he becomes Captain America once again.
That led to Captain America breaking into the Oval Office and revealing that the person behind the conspiracy was Richard Nixon. You don't see Nixon's face, but there's no question.
Everybody knew that it was Nixon, but there was no way that I was going to, like, actually put Nixon in a Senate hearing, you know. I mean, first of all, not very good comics.
They took the Watergate idea and played it out to its logical conclusion.
That basically gave us the Cap versus government scenario, which has been standard ever since.
It's a huge story in the Captain America canon, and there have been sort of variations and things that have been played on it over the years in different circumstances.
Winter Soldier, Civil War, you know, that's the character that we still know today.
S.H.I.E.L.D. is not what we thought it was. It's been taken over by Hydra.
I really love the fact that Marvel, over the decades, has really figured out how to make the legacy work and still make sense in 21st century terms.
When we were doing comics in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, nobody ever really thought there was a world beyond comics.
It was a different time. It was very, very tough to produce what we do in the comics properly on screen.
Well, I think it's important to note that I'm probably older than dirt. I remember seeing the movie Serial.
Captain America was the very, very first Marvel character to ever make it onto the big screen.
Martin Goodman, Marvel's publisher, gave the rights to Republic Pictures for free. He did not charge a penny for them based on the publicity that the magazines would sell better. But they changed literally everything about him.
Not Steve Rogers. He didn't have a shield, he carried a gun.
Wait, I'll talk.
It thrilled me. He was larger than life, which all great superheroes need to be.
I really did not become a Marvel fan until I saw the first Marvel TV show, which was the Marvel Superheroes animated series that came out in 1966. They were done with very, very, very limited animation. It's like a picture of the character and just his mouth moving.
I suggest we return to shore.
But they were adapted directly from Stan's stories in the comics.
Bucky!
And the artwork was adapted directly from the art in the comics.
I've got him. Look out, Bucky!
The Captain America movies were bad. There were two of them, actually. They were just terrible.
Captain America's motorcycle might be something that we want to talk about.
It seemed
awesome
in a way that things were awesome back in 1978.
I look back at that old Captain America with a ton of fondness because even though it's incredibly imperfect, as a kid, all you want to see is your characters come to life.
It almost feels like he was just always there. I know I had some friends who read comic books. I wasn't really too into the comic book, but I think the first exposure might have been in the form of a video game.
You know, I didn't see the 1990 version of Captain America.
I'm good. That looks like you're not getting those hours back.
I loved it. As a kid, you don't care. You're just happy to see someone in costume dancing about. You just think, this is a Captain America movie. This is incredible.
All I could remember was smiling the entire time.
Mr. President! Thanks.
Captain America title and the character himself, like any popular iconic character, has gone through his ups and downs, you know, sales peaks and sales valleys.
But I think the nice thing about a universe of characters like Marvel is that you have different characters for different eras. And there's just periods where you just have to accept it's like music or fashion or anything. There's just periods where the character isn't going to be popular.
In a world where the Punisher and characters like that are the ones that are getting all the attention, that's a world where Captain America has a little difficulty fitting in.
Wolverine, he had the spikes that would come out and he wasn't afraid to use them. I think people want cool.
It just becomes harder and harder to be that kind of hero.
He's a funny one because in some ways he can be just incredibly earnest and uptight.
As a result, I think Captain America faded back a bit. I don't think Cap ever faded back entirely because there were too many comic book writers and artists who adored the character.
Well, the guys at Marvel knew I was a big Cap fan. It became sort of a dream book that I wanted to do at some point. This is around 2000. And Marvel came and approached me about doing a reboot of Captain America. We started talking about what we could do with it, something that was different. I wasn't a fan of the costume villain of the week idea. I wanted to deal with more of real-world scenarios. So I agreed to do it, and going through ideas, we spent several months, and we were getting close to putting some kind of script together and getting work done on it. Then 9/11 happened, and we immediately knew that we were scrapping what we had. We didn't know what we were going to do. There was something a little more cruel at our doorsteps. My Captain America was in a lot of pain, and he was angry.
"9/11 affected everybody tremendously.
Marvel Publishing is based here in New York City. I was here during 9/11 and got to witness, like so many of us, the horror that occurred here.
In the pain, in the trauma of the moment, everybody was shaken. It was a transformative period for the country, and that was filtered through the eyes of Captain America. A character wearing the flag was going to have a reaction, going to have a response. It was going to have a response to this.
It felt callous if we did not, in some way, address what had happened when the towers fell. And we dealt with it head on.
Our story picks up with Steve Rogers at the site, helping look for survivors and dig through the rubble. As we're working on it, I had a lot of people in my mind, not just the victims and their families, but the firemen, the policemen of the city and all over the country.
It was more of a metaphoric tale of our heroes not being able to do anything in the face of this, not even being the true heroes of a tragedy like this. And it's a story in which our heroes stand back and spiritually support the rescue workers that were there saving people and being inspired by the humanity that was being expressed here.
September 11th could be a preview of what could come.
There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. In Afghanistan, we see al-Qaeda's vision for the world.
The world had changed. America had changed. When we had always seen Steve Rogers being so clear in terms of what was right, he was now someone who was questioning authority. He was questioning the government. He was questioning things.
That led to, I think, a little bit of a renaissance and interest in the character because people were looking to it. And I think it's kind of permanently changed the character and the way it's viewed even today.
He somehow becomes more relevant because, you know, we're tense. We got issues. We got political issues that he can have a say in.
It is now my honor to sign into law the USA Patriot Act.
The Justice Department has gone too far.
Tempers were at a high. One of the most pervasive debates of the time was exactly how much of your liberty are you willing to give up for more safety? Civil War is an event we did that had something to say about the real world.
We are having a retreat that wasn't a particularly good retreat. We're kind of going on day 3. No one was really getting along. Everyone's being kind of grumpy. And we started talking about heroes versus heroes.
It begins with a tragedy where someone's trying to stop a villainous action. A huge explosion occurs and civilians are killed. And so began the Superhero Registration Act.
Tony Stark took a very strong position, which was that heroes should register themselves. Cap went back to the things that he had remembered from the 1940s.
Captain America represents the ultimate in liberty. And liberty means that you don't follow every move of your citizens.
Cap would always come out for the rights of the individual.
This caused a split within the superhero community.
And that's where you have a civil war.
We tried to take a balanced view of the opinion, the same way that there are two sides of the fence in regards to exactly what types of measures should be taking place to deal with terrorism. Our fans were asked to sort of take sides in this story.
Which is kind of where the "whose side are you on" tagline came from.
Whichever side Cap is on will probably seem like the right side to most of the readers.
He looked around, he saw that he was creating divisiveness that was not better for society, and he surrenders himself.
And it was really a masterpiece of execution.
There's a short list of characters whose deaths are kind of quintessential to the characters they're related to. Probably the primary one being Spider-Man's Uncle Ben. You bring Uncle Ben back, you got nothing. For years, Bucky was the great loss of Captain America. That was the dark cloud he carried with him, and nobody had ever figured out how to do this and make it work.
It's amazing to me that they kept Bucky dead as long as they did. And I'm still a little bit surprised they brought him back, but it makes for a great story.
Ed Brubaker, a hell of a good writer, said, what I want to do is I want to bring back Bucky. Okay, Ed, if you want to do this, you want to convince me of this, how did he survive? Where's he been? You know, Ed's answers to all of this became the spine of the story he told.
Now you see Bucky, years later, experimentations have been done to him. He's a killer.
Bucky has no idea who he's fighting. He doesn't know who he is.
I thought that was a fantastic reimagining of who Bucky was, and I thought, well done.
Cap is always best when he's fighting against himself and fighting against his memories and his past.
A red, white, and blue icon died yesterday, and he may have taken the last remnants of an idealistic America with him. Steve Rogers, better known to comic book fans as Captain America, was shot to death in a comic book released yesterday.
It was shocking when it happened, and it was very successful, largely because, you know, they did just such an excellent job positioning Captain America, the series and the character, in the manner of a modern-day political thriller. Right at the point that you were able to kind of get Bucky sort of back to himself is exactly the point at which Captain America gets killed.
Other people tried to be Captain America, and that didn't work out.
Bucky, at one point, took over the mantle of Captain America.
And that became a whole series of stories that, again, kind of pushed the character in a different direction, gave you a different view on what it meant to be Captain America, right up until the end when we brought Steve Rogers back.
But as America continued to change, so did Steve Rogers, realizing that the time had come to hand over the shield to the next best man.
Falcon seemed like a natural character to take over, and he comes with his own belief system, his own ethics, and I think it just adds a whole other dimension to the mythos of Captain America.
It's always been a part of the fabric. Just as America evolves and what it means to be an American evolves, there should be absolutely an African-American Captain America.
For me as a kid, if I had seen that, I would have lost my mind. It's not just for me, it's paying it forward to the next generation to say, you can be Captain America.
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's totally necessary. And at the same time, is it something that should be made a big deal? It feels like it should just be normal.
In 2008, Iron Man had hit rather well. And that gave Marvel the incentive to finally say, all right, we're going to make a handful of movies leading up to the Avengers.
Finding the perfect Steve Rogers was so important to our film slate moving forward because we had the Avengers in mind. We were preparing for that. You had to find an actor that could play off of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, Tony Stark, and we struck gold with Chris Evans. I mean, the guy is Captain America.
I was a little apprehensive, and it's just because of the love that he has. So many people have followed him for so long, and there's just a fear as an actor that you won't do it justice, that people will be disappointed.
For us, it's unimaginable to have anyone else play Steve Rogers.
Chris Evans looks like a Jack Kirby drawing.
Obviously, he's very handsome. But he's handsome in that wholesome way where you trust him.
I thought the casting from top to bottom was terrific. Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull.
Hey, Hydra. Look what we have. We have a massive hit, the big hit of summer.
I think the place that Captain America really shines is the Avengers movies.
He has his place, I think, firmly within the Avengers. It's very different, but that also makes for great comic moments.
Oh, smash.
You know, there's a natural, wonderful chemistry, I think, between him and Iron Man in particular.
We need a plan of attack.
I have a plan. Attack. When they started filming the Avengers, Captain America hadn't come out yet.
I was trying to play it cool. I was nervous. I was nervous. You don't want to be the weak link in the chain.
And yet, there's never a doubt in his performance that he is going to own this role.
And then after the Avengers, we get the Winter Soldier.
That, to me, was an extraordinary achievement. You know, kudos to the Russo brothers.
Well, that's the best thing about the Russos. When they wanted to do a movie that felt like a 1970s thriller, you think, well, I hope these directors can pull that off. And they did.
I have to think Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the second one, to me is the quintessential Marvel movie. I think it's the best film that we've made, up till this point anyway.
Joe at this point is in his mid-90s. We decided to throw a party at his apartment and watch a DVD that had been sent to us by the first Avengers film team.
He just all of a sudden started shaking his head and he goes, "Man, I wish Kirby was here to see this." He was so proud.
One of the most extraordinary experiences of my life will probably be the moment when Steve Rogers grabs the trash can lid and swings it around to protect himself against the bully. I'm sitting there in the dark, and in front of me I hear, that was good. He loved it. He loved the fact that they took the origin almost exactly from what he and Jack had done. And there's no experience that can equal that.
I hope that Jack would have been pleased with the portrayal of his character.
Well, honestly, I think he would have loved the movies. It's really a shame he didn't get to see them. So, I'm sorry. This happens every once in a while. Yeah, he would have loved seeing, he really would have loved seeing the movies.
I'm very excited to see how they adapt into the present and into the future.
Cap stands for something so clearly, people can't help but root for the guy.
Let us show you what this character can really be.
You've operated with unlimited power and no supervision. That's something the world can no longer tolerate.
Do we have the right to register people and follow their every move?
That's one of those things that actually would really split them right down the middle.
It's interesting when you put Captain America in a situation that he doesn't have an answer for. And with Civil War, they do a really good job of making it hard to figure out which side of the fence you're going to fall on. And right is shades of gray.
There's also one hell of a personal story.
When Captain America fights Iron Man, I don't know the outcome of that.
What do?
We fight.
Captain America in video games, bring it. This is going to be insane.
We're about to go into the 4th season of Marvel's Avengers Assemble. So the animated series has Cap firmly the center of what's going on with the Avengers there.
In the comics, he has a couple more twists and turns.
As wonderful as Civil War was, we're actually currently working on a sequel to it.
Hopefully, we'll be able to tap into the same sort of spirit we were able to access in the original Civil War without just doing the same story over again.
Coming this summer, Marvel puts its original Avenger back in comics as Steve Rogers returns as Captain America.
In the television series, we have Agent Carter.
If you hadn't cast Haley Atwell, you wouldn't have a TV show.
There's more going on in her personal life, and you'll see a lot more humor with her and Mr. Jarvis.
Once people get a load of what Agent Carter is all about, I think there's going to be an awful lot of people that are reinventing themselves to be more like Agent Carter.
In the second season, we're talking about the Cold War and the communist scare that is happening. And she punches and kicks a lot of people.
New hairstyle?
Love the hat.
There was always a Captain America somewhere. Maybe he wasn't wearing kind of leathered spandex, but there was always a Captain America.
Suiting up to try and give yourself for something bigger than you because you believe in something. You believe in something good and right and just. It's powerful.
Captain America can go on as long as there is heroic entertainment.
It's about what he represents as a symbol of an idea.
And that's who he'll be 75 years from now.
He's open, he's honest. So the more unanswerable questions you present to him, the more dynamic the character becomes.
The Marvel Universe is best when it takes big swings and moves the ball down the field.
You're telling stories, visual stories with writing and art, and you've got to have both. You've got to have people on both sides of that equation doing their best work if you want the best final product.
The interest in that kind of storytelling, those kinds of characters, is not going to go away.
These characters have to be relatable. They have to have a heart to them. That means that the stories have so much more weight.
Cap is so morally sound that when you throw a conflict his way, how he reacts is so telling and colorful because he's such a consistent character.
But Cap is rock solid. He's always pointing north.
He represents what America should be.
The spirit of the possible, of the American dream.
What better hero to live vicariously through than Captain America?
And I think as long as we can keep him as that kind of a beacon, he's going to be a character that people always want to watch.
People can relate to it and at the same time can dream about what they could become.
If you believe in something and you go about it in a way that will help others, then you truly are a hero.
Zach Galifianakis, Aubrey Plaza, plus Weezer performs. New Kimmel, Late Night Tonight.